to host today two distinguished speakers, and the session is chaired by another one with a great experience in international affairs and both research and practice. First, let me turn to Mr. Thomas Gomart, the director of the French Institute for Foreign Affairs, a scholar and expert specifically on Russia affairs, but not only. Apart from many publications on that topic, from history to strategic relations and defense, he's recently also researching cyber defense, and that's an area that is growing, that is very present and up to date, also important in the Polish thinking about the future of Europe, future of defense. Then we have Senator Bogdan Klich, person you don't need to be introduced too much, but also a former Minister of Defense, Civic Platform, Civic Coalition, currently I think I'm not mistaken there. Definitely a knowledgeable person, a member of the core international community on security and defense. And this session is moderated by Marcin Zaborowski, Senior Associate Visegrad Insight, and as of this year, newly appointed Editor-in-Chief of Republika Nowa. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ambassador, ambassadors, members of the diplomatic corps and think tanks, community journalism, we're all very welcome. We're all very happy that you're coming here, but I think there will be a lot of space to discuss. But the introductions to the debate is by Marcin now.
Thank you, Wojtek, and thank you everyone for coming. Our speakers have already been introduced, so I agreed with both speakers that every one of them will take 5 to maybe 7 minutes to give some introductory remarks, and then we will start the debate. I will throw two or three questions, then the floor will be open to you. So get ready with your questions as our speakers will proceed. I just would like to say thank you to both our speakers for coming to Warsaw, because both of them came especially for this occasion from Warsaw. Senator Klich flew from Krakow, and we are very, very grateful for that. And Thomas flew from Paris. You know, this is an important time in Polish-French relations. We are all aware that President Macron will be here in just over a week time, and this is a first presidential visit in 6 years, and the first one of this president. You know, hopes are quite high, and you know, we didn't plan it that way, but we are very happy that it the timing came around the way it did. So with that, let me just put the floor perhaps first to Minister Bogdan Klich, currently the chair of the Foreign and European Relations Committee in the Senate.
Thank you very much. To be in such a distinguished place and to have the opportunity to exchange views with you and to be chaired, the discussion to be chaired by Marcin Zaborowski, it is a great privilege. Having said that, let me say that I would concentrate on two issues. I mean, the current stage and the future of NATO, that we together with France share some worries, some concerns, but also the willingness to work for the strengthening and enhancement of the alliance. And without a doubt, this is our joint task. Secondly, on the European Union, particularly on CSDP and CFSP and CSDP, it means common foreign security and defense policy of that entity, in which the current government in Poland has a little bit different, I will say that diplomatically, different position than this one presented by the French president and the French administration. But the opposition has much more in common with the position manifested by several French politicians, with President Macron as the main pro-European politician from France. As for NATO, I would say that we are in a very paradoxical situation. This paradoxical situation was described very clearly by NATO Secretary General, and I will call that Stoltenberg's paradox. Because on one hand, we have tensions, from time to time also disputes between the members of the alliance, mainly between the United States and some European partners within the alliance, concerning variety of issues. I mean, the nuclear deal with Iran, for example, or the trade issues, or the climate change issues. On the other hand, this is my mistake. On the other hand, we have several of decisions and steps that were taken during last years, especially referring to the security of the eastern flank of the alliance, that show unity of the alliance and show the progress of reinforcement of countries like Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, or Estonia, or Romania in the southern part of this, Romania, Bulgaria on the southern part of this flank. So this paradox is between the political aspect of the alliance and military dimension of NATO. As for the second one, let's notice, because it is necessary to notice that according to the decisions taken during the Newport summit, according to those decisions that were that created the rapid reaction to the Ukrainian-Russian crisis, NATO enhanced the adaptation and the assurance measures. Assurance measures in the form of exercises, multinational exercises, adaptation measures according to the decisions of the Newport summit, based on enhancement of NRF and creation of so-called spearhead of NATO, I mean VJTF. That was visible at that time. That was important at the time, but everybody within the alliance knew that it was not enough, that it is necessary to go further. And the Warsaw Summit of 2016 was another step, important step, with the creation of enhanced forward presence concerning our countries, I mean Poland and 3 Baltic states, and tailored forward presence concerning Romania and Bulgaria. From that point of view, I would say that both Newport Summit's reaction and Warsaw Summit's reaction were crucial and comprehensive concerning the reinforcement of the eastern flank of the alliance. Maybe it is not so popular here in Poland. Maybe it is not so noticed in my country, but comparing, the strategy that is consequently implemented also with the decisions of the Brussels Summit 2018, I mean the initiative of NATO Readiness Initiative, creating or making a purpose of readiness during 30 days for 30 squadrons, 30 vessels and 30 battalions. This initiative, together with the former initiative, this is the comprehensive strategy concerning the eastern flank. And against this background, we don't have within NATO such a comprehensive strategy concerning the southern flank. And this is something that we should work about, that we should work on, that should be created, because even spectacular decisions and spectacular operations of the alliance, like this one in Iraq, that was set up to train and prepare better Iraqi troops. These are particular decisions, not creating the comprehensive strategy for the southern flank. So I would be in favor of thinking and creating the comprehensive strategy also for reinforcement of the southern flank of the alliance. And what we have in common with France, this is our concern about so-called 30 days gap. Because if the NATO readiness initiative is implemented, still there is a question about 30 days after the possible aggression of a country or a group of countries. Are we prepared to do something with existing instruments like VJTF, like reinforced NRF, to support countries that are the object, the target of the aggression, or not? In my opinion, we are not ready to do that, so it is necessary to bridge this gap and to prepare means and instruments, you know, to reinforce such countries. So this is the task, and this is the main issue concerning right now the ability of NATO to react for the possible aggression, territorial aggression about aimed at one or a group of the members of the alliance. Secondly, very briefly, I hope that it will be the main issue of our debate. CSDP overcame the crisis between 2008 and 2016. I don't have doubts about that. It was the deepest crisis in the history of CSDP, because the first crisis of the year 2003 was connected with the intervention in Iraq and was the split between members of the European Union concerning that task. But it was overcame very quickly. Just after that, we had European security strategy. Just after that, the creation of the European Defence Agency in 2004. And even during this crisis, we had the first serious Altea mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The first serious mission of the European Union. So at that time, European Union member states were ready to overcome, you know, such a crisis. Between 2008 and 2016, we had a deep institutional crisis of the European Union, and one of the dimensions of that, it was the crisis of newly created CSDP. So CSDP was blocked, and only after the results of Brexit, British referendum, and after the election of President Donald Trump, there was the beginning of new initiatives. Began with the European Global Strategy that was delivered, implementation plan that was to implement the strategy, and some other initiatives that were based on existing instruments. Existing, I mean those means that were introduced into the treaties, like PESCO, deeply rooted in the Lisbon Treaty, or the European Defence Fund, not designed by the treaty, but created in the aftermath of the discussion within the European Union what to do to support European industry. So we have seen the progress concerning CSDP after 2016, But one should be aware that still not all the instruments included into the treaties were used politically, used by the European Union. So we have still existing means, existing tools that could be implemented. And there are new initiatives going beyond this legal framework of the European Union, especially presented by President Macron and French diplomacy, for example, in the form of European Security Council or the European Treaty. I will say clearly as the basis for our discussion that particularly myself and the biggest part of my political circle are in favor of, we are in favor of implementation of those instruments that are within the framework, within the legal framework of the European Union, and then discussing about other initiatives that would go beyond this legal framework. Why? Because those that are within this area are inclusive. When those newly created, can be exclusive, like the European Intervention Initiative. A little bit too long, Mr. Chair.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but you know, that's true. We do have time constraints, so there was super interesting outline of where we stand on the future of the alliance, and perhaps a little bit surprising that the senators stress the importance of the southern flank, which is rare in in the usual Polish discourse. So over to you. You were briefed on the expectations of the Polish audience yesterday, so it's up to you what you will deliver us at the moment.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Visegrad Insight for its invitation. It's a real pleasure to be back, I would say, in Warsaw and to have this discussion with two long-standing friends of E3, Senator Klich and Marcin. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to debate with you. I have maybe three brief points to start. The very first one, Senator advised me to speak about European strategic autonomy, which is certainly an unclear concept. I will try to explain to it from my understanding. I'm not sure it will be more clear after. That's another issue. Second, maybe a point about, what does it mean in Paris to have a more geopolitical EU Commission? And third, I will finish with a very brief description of the strategic landscape seated in Paris, because it's completely different than the one I can understand for the people seated in Warsaw. A completely different one. So let me start with European strategic autonomy. I think that there is a misunderstanding about this notion, because very often it is still, I would say still, presented as a balance, a choice between, the EU and NATO, which is absolutely not the case in the French mindsets. The real issue is much more on the European side of the transatlantic alliance, a choice between a EU level or a national level. And to some extent, France is the only country which can still have a sort of choice for a national level with its model of a comprehensive army. But it's not the choice which has been taken. The choice is to try to progress in terms of European strategic autonomy related to the EU global strategy draft in 2016. Second remark, this European strategic autonomy, it's not only institutional mechanism. I think what is very important is to be able for Europeans to continue to be able to conduct high-end combined arms warfare on their own in the context of both collective defense and expeditionary operations. I insist on the both, and the fact that Europeans should be able to act on the full spectrum of conflicts, low intensity and high intensity. So to put things bluntly, European strategic autonomy, it's also a way to say we should be able, as Europeans, to make initial entry sometimes. So it's not only a question of labor division, between the EU and NATO. It's to find the proper combination between the capability we can have in the transatlantic context if we have to act by ourselves in a situation in which the US attitude is more and more unpredictable. Third, European strategic autonomy should be observed at 3 basic levels. The very first one, it is the autonomy in terms of decision, which implies strategic intelligence. Are Europeans capable to assess a situation by themselves? The answer is no, or it's partly no or partly yes. But there is a key element, it is the fact that we do need, if we want to continue to act on the international scene, to have an autonomous access to the space. And that's an industrial challenge, that's a strategic challenge, which is crucial to have this capability of making our decision with the Trump administration, by the way, even if it is said in a much more assertive way. But despite this level of military spending, what are we capable to do together? And our assessment, at E3 is in fact not so much. Maybe something like Mali, being optimistic. So maybe a possibility, to deploy between 5,000 to 10,000 troops. We are very far away from the ambition of the Helsinki goals, Very, very far away. So we declined, in fact, Europeans declined in military terms during the last decades, the last 2 decades, or 3 decades. The third level, it is the autonomy in industrial terms. So I know that for the Polish authorities, you have this calculation that the more you buy Americans, the more you are protected by Americans. On that, I think it will be a point of discussion. We have a completely different approach because we do say that Europeans should preserve its technological capabilities and should be able to make some merger in the industrial field. And some steps were made during the last years on that. Even if it's difficult, and the more we will progress on that, the more of reaction we will have from our US ally, obviously. And that's very, very critical for Poland. My second point is about, the geopolitical commission. I don't know if it's the proper wording, because geopolitics, you have all this debate between Europeans, especially when it is said by a German lady. It can be uncomfortable for some Europeans. I think the proper wording would be much more to have a more geo-economic commission and to be able to relate our trade policy, which is a competence of the EU. The EU is respected as a trade actor, but to relate this policy to the attempts to develop the strategic autonomy. Because we suffer from the attitude of China and the US using their geopolitical tools to have geoeconomics benefits. And that leads, I think, to a thinking about the policy of sanctions. Just a figure. In 1991, Europe had 6 regimes of sanctions against 6 countries. Today we have 34 regimes of sanctions. And we are facing a situation in which the efficiency of these sections is declining, and it will be more and more declining because of the transatlantic divergence. So I think that we should be able to rethink the use of sanctions, and also to be able to react to the things coming from China, Russia, and the US in geoeconomic terms. Third, the strategic landscapes seen from Paris. It struck me, I travel extensively, and it struck me that the sense of urgency is completely different in the European capitals. It is different because in France we had 250 killed people, since on All Souls since 2015, and we had 2,000 jihadists in Syria. So it explains a lot, because in fact what is observed, seated in Paris, it is to say we are to deal with three big things. First of all, power competition, namely the competition between China and the US and its consequences in Europe, but also the fact that second or third ranked powers like Russia and Turkey are able now to create their own space. What is happening in Libya, for instance, is very telling. So power competition, it's not only related, to China and the US. It's also related to, I would say, medium-sized power, much more capable to reduce our freedom of action to some extent, to put things bluntly. So that's the first thing. The second one is military jihadism. And the fact that, as I said, now we use our troops in terms of national security, which was the first time since the war in Algeria. So it's a big change for our authorities. And third, we have more and more to deal with hybrid things. You mentioned in your introduction cyber, for instance, but it's something more and more challenging, which are creating new situations in which it's very difficult to attribute. The attribution has become something very difficult to be made for the hybrid things made, I would say, under the threshold of the warfare, which are more and more visible, especially in the cyberspace. So, this sense of urgency, once again, is very different, because the analysis made by the French authority is to say that we promoted a multipolar world, and we have indeed a multipolar world, but without multilateralism. Because multilateralism is attacked by Russia, annexation of Crimea, destabilization of Donbass, attitude toward OSCE, and so on. We can continue. China Sea, political conditionality, and the US, which is our main ally. So for Europeans, it's a very, very challenging situation. Let me finish by reminding you that France has at the time being 30,000 troops abroad. What is new with President Macron? It is the fact that the French military was destroyed by President Sarkozy and President Hollande, even if they intervene very often. The first real decision made by President Macron was to raise the military spending to respect the 2% decided by the NATO World Summit in 2014. And we are on this trend. So I finish on that just to try to explain that very often, the French position is not sufficiently well explained, in my view. That's why I'm very happy to to be there, and to explain also that European strategic autonomy should not be portrayed, you know, as the whole debate which is completely out in France regarding NATO. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now, I mean, I normally would ask our speakers the questions, and we would continue with a moderated debate. But I mean, you came here for a reason. So let me just say that I'm very happy to open the floor to your questions almost immediately. Perhaps by the way of commenting, I would say that what we heard from our speakers shines a very different light on what we normally see as a debate, which is portraying Polish foreign security policy and the way the French foreign security policy is being portrayed. Normally, the Polish foreign security policy will be portrayed as being, you know, very pro-NATO, very pro-American, perceiving NATO essentially as an instrument providing collective defense for member states, and the kind of, you know, NATO should end its role on this. What we heard from the senator is that at least a part of the elites in Poland is very much prepared to see that NATO should be providing security to the southern flank of NATO, and with that, also to perhaps consider such tasks as a fight against terrorism, which is obviously, you know, in letter the essential task of NATO, but not very much spoken in this country, I believe. At the same time, what we heard from Thomas is also standing in contradiction to what we have in the public space. In public space, France, at least in this country, is seen as a country who is very pro-EU and is using EU as a tool for balancing, you know, NATO, which is, you know, which is perceived as an instrument of American power, and in that context, you know, for France, that useful instrument is the European Union. What we heard from you, and I think it, and I'm sorry if I misrepresent that, but I think that France is, you know, the EU route is one of the routes, yeah, for security and defense policy. The national route is as, if not more important, frankly. What is very important in this debate, I think, is to see the fact that France is essentially a power with, you know, global interests, frankly, and global outlook, global perspective. Poland doesn't have that kind of outlook. It's very intensely focused on the region. Hence, some of the misunderstanding could come from that very fact. I hope I did not misrepresent any of what was being said here. And with that, let me open the floor to your questions, if you have any at this point. Okay, the gentleman here on the left, please. And can you please identify yourself? And, I don't have. I have to share the microphone with you. And please identify yourself.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Łukasz Dębski. I'm a PhD candidate, Warsaw University. First of all, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your remark, which I see is very important to open the discussion. I'm going to say a short comment to the director, to Mr. Gomart. And well, I agree and I disagree. I agree with you that France may be extremely angry with Poland because of this Caracal's difficult case. We do not do this in diplomacy when we give promises, declarations, and we say we are not interested anymore. That was a huge mistake, I see, from the Polish side. But I do not disagree with what you said about the United States. A month ago, there has been here director of the White House, Mr. Robert Spalding, and he said very clearly what we say in Polish, if you can count on yourself. So I do not think the United States are ready to protect us in every single situation. My question is, because I regret my minister and you decided to not say about the most important Polish, French and German project called Weimar Triangle. Can you tell me, please, also my minister, Minister Klich, what do you think? What would be possible to to reborn this project in the field of security, especially in the development of the space sector? Because Poland, France is a very, very experienced country in the field of space, and Poland, unfortunately, we have a very short history. Since 2012, the Polish Space Agency had been established. So this is the most important question. One more question, if I can ask very briefly. What about the cooperation between military production sector in Poland and in France? It's something very important. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a comment and I think two questions. Let me just we'll pick up two more questions and then perhaps we'll go back to you two, Mert, at the end.
Hello. Firstly, welcome to our show again, and I'm a student of the Lazarski University, master student of Marcin Zaborowski, and I'm from Turkey. By the way, I will try to develop a little bit more, of course, neutral position and questions for you. Firstly, I would like to thank you for Mr. Gomart personally, because I really get benefit from your studies and publications about Russian energy policies and security. In my master thesis, it was about energy security and foreign policy about Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and South Europe. Yeah, firstly, I will also just want to just so short comment, because I know it's generally creating some contradictory to do comments and to ask questions. I don't want to take so much time, but I would like to ask three main questions about EU and NATO. Firstly, first two questions I would like to ask you, Mr. Gomart. Firstly, I'd like to say about post-Brexit, about this issue, in which way it can get shape in the close future. The second question is, as you know, there are really big differences between priorities of the EU member states also about security. It's, of course, firstly because of geopolitical positions, the geostrategic positions there, like Libya situation, it has another meaning for Italy, but Russia has another meaning, or Russian hegemony, or possible hegemony of Russia has another meaning for Visegrad group countries and Baltic states. Firstly, my question, what do you think about this dilemmatic situation? I mean, how can be solved this situation, about especially European security autonomy? About it, I'm wondering, what do you offer about it? How can be solved? And my last question for you: how do you define Turkey's situation about this EU security autonomy? I mean, are you thinking it's binding with this issue, or it's out of the topic? The Turkey as a south corridor of security from South Europe. And my last question is for you, Mr. Minister, is what do you think about the Polish initiatives are sufficient to create security perspective, or security institutions, or security organization, I would like to call like that, against Russian threat? I mean, there also other auditor just mentioned, I agree with it. Now it looks like so pro-American security concept, but I also don't believe it will be useful for Poland or this region. What do you think? What kind of alternatives can be for Poland? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Merit, and Ambassador Truszczyński. Ambassador Truszczyński was the ambassador to the EU for a number of years.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Jan Truszczyński, a retired Polish and European technocrat, if you like. Having seen your recent book about a week ago in the Visegrad bookstore in Brussels, I said to myself, I must go and pick this man's brains now that he comes to Warsaw. Let me ask you a couple of questions then. One is about the forthcoming official visits of your country's president to Warsaw. In your view, what will be the rationale for Macron coming to Poland right now on an official visit, less than 100 days ahead of the forthcoming presidential election, and with the political landscape in Poland deteriorated almost beyond repair? He will have to be walking a very thin line, and the question is, will he manage to walk that line without falling to either side? The second question would be about, indeed, French-German cooperation. My colleagues in Brussels keep saying, well, the cooperation, while not running aground, has encountered a host of problems over the past 3 years. And while the Germans and the French, at all possible levels, know each other better than anyone else does in Europe, it doesn't nonetheless help them much in reaching workable compromises, solutions, which might be used to pull the others into the cooperation behind France and Germany, those two countries acting as a real motor of integration again. Question is, do you think that changing the equation a bit, letting third country partners, the Spanish or the Italians or the Polish, indeed, given the existing Weimar Triangle cooperation, would it give any added possible value? Would it help to facilitate, to ignite, to restart the cooperation and the reaching of compromises not across the board, but at least in some of the areas of cooperation? The third question will be about your assessments regarding the progress made heretofore on PESCO implementation and the preparedness of the European Union member states to use well the forthcoming European Defence Funds. There is little, analysis on that. There are no assessments yet, no midterm evaluations or audits, but surely at your level there must be some initial insight, some knowledge about how it is proceeding. Is it going to deliver useful, large-scale added value or not exactly?
Thank you. So we're going back now to our speakers. Most questions were to Thomas, who probably needs some time to think about his responses. Let's start with the senator.
I have the chance to be a little bit brief and to say that with General Spalding concerning this question about his views, I had a long conversation some months ago, and frankly speaking, I do not share majority of his opinions. I share that for a country like Poland, being one of the countries, one of the series of countries on the eastern flank, it is necessary to have as good as possible politico-military relations with the United States. That's true. But I don't share his opinion, his justification of those relations, because he speaks about those bilateral relations as if he wanted to make a difference between those relations and our relations with the other European partners. So no, I don't share this opinion, and I am in favor of having simultaneously good relations with the United States, political military relations, together with good, let's say, contribution to the security of Europe within the framework of the alliance. So, good position of Poland and creative position of Poland within the alliance. And the third indispensable element, this is a good position of Poland within the European community, within the European Union. It is possible. It is possible to make those three relationships simultaneously productive. It is not necessary to make a contradiction between good relations with good Atlantic relations and good European relations. It is possible, and this possibility was proved, several times in our recent history. For example, all the efforts after the creation of CSDP in 1999 were to support the development of that policy within the EU. And the policy of the government between 2007 and 2015 was to make a balance between those three dimensions of our foreign, security, and defense policy. So, in conclusion, General Spalding is not right when he tries to celebrate Polish-American relationship and not and forgets about the necessity of Polish strong position within the alliance and Polish strong position of the European Union. From this perspective, you see how much we have to achieve during next years, because our relations with the rest, or the big part of our partners within the alliance, were devastated by the current government, and the position of Poland was diminished, was weakened by the policy of this government, and frankly speaking, we are maybe not isolated, but we are very weak on the margin of the European decision processes. And very briefly about Polish initiatives, sufficient or not concerning a Russian threat. Still not sufficient. Still we have more NATO, America, and European Union in Poland. Still we have more military cooperation with our main partners in Europe. Still we have more American troops in Poland. I say that I used to say that for years. Minister Sikorski was the first that signed the agreement concerning American presence of American base in Redzikowo. I was the first Minister of Defense in Poland that invited American troops for permanent stationing, not continuous stationing, but permanent deployment. It was a small unit. It was a very small unit, air detachment. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure you know that more American boots on Polish ground create more security of Poland because of deterrence. Maybe not so much of defense, but deterrence, in categories of deterrence. The same is with European Union. Absolutely the same. More European funds that are devoted, that are allocated for establishment, for development of European capabilities is absolutely crucial. Polish involvement in PESCO should be extended, should be absolutely extended, not only 15%. Also, what would be important, it would be creation, of European defense or European Defense and Security Union, according to Article J4 of the Maastricht Treaty. We should be in favor of the creation of European defense or European Defense and Security Union in Europe. The only thing that I don't understand is the European army. I cannot understand this concept. I have the feeling that this concept is without the content. So those people speaking about European Union, about European army, either do not know what they are speaking about, or they are speaking about different issues. But I don't understand this concept, because there is no NATO army. So how European army could be created? And last but not least, one of the aims to reinforce Polish security, it was a good relationship with Ukraine. So improving relations with that country would stabilize our security. And from that point of view, we have much to do.
Thank you, Senator. As for the notion of European army, if I remember correctly, the first serious politician who brought it into the debate in this country was Jarosław Kaczyński. So in 2000 or maybe 1999, if I'm not mistaken. But so perhaps he could explain the meaning of the notion. And also, it just struck me this the dilemma about avoidance of the need to choose between the alliance with with NATO and the European Union. Kind of made me nostalgic for the stuff that we wrote with Ola Wosica, the former director of OSW, 20 years ago. We wrote Poland shouldn't be forced to choose between mother and a father. Kids shouldn't be faced with this kind of a choice. So let me pass the floor to Thomas. I mean, you had like all variety of questions, starting from industrial defense cooperation to geopolitical questions. So it's tough plate in front of you.
Thank you, Marcin, and thank you for these very good questions and difficult ones. Let me start with the first one on France and Poland within the transatlantic context. Very often it is the relation between France and NATO is portrayed. Let me explain to you that at the core of French security policy, you have, since the end of the First World War, you have the P3, the relation between London, Washington, and Paris. And it is still the case. So it's a way to start to respond to the question about Brexit. We will celebrate the 10 years of the Lancaster Agreement, which are absolutely pivotal for the future of both nuclear deterrences. And the level of cooperation between Washington and Paris is higher than ever in terms of intelligence sharing at the time being. So keep in mind that, P3 is at the core of the French security policy and its, I would say, diplomatic approach, permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. But keep also in mind that France understood, since I would say the 60s, with the gradual deterrence, that we must secure ourselves because the US can leave. Ask the Kurds, for instance. So it's really a big issue because at the same time we are completely interconnected with the P3, but we made this investment to secure ourselves through nuclear deterrence, and we will continue to invest on that. I don't open the debate about a so-called European nuclear deterrence because I think it's a non-starter. Now the Caracal, it's one thing among others. What is important, it's not, in my view, the fact that the deal was not done. That's life to some extent. What is important, it is the fact that it's reflecting a huge gap between Poles and French regarding military industries. For France, it's an asset. It's an European asset which should be protected because that's a condition of technological independence. That's something on which, Europeans, Germans, Brits, and so on, Italians, Spanish, Poles, and so on, should invest, should defend. So just the Caracal is, okay, that's down. But what is important? Do we consider what we call in French BITD, Base Industrielle Technologique de Défense, like an asset or like a burden? And for France, it's clearly an asset. Now, Europeans are still able to make the next generation of aircraft. Europeans are capable to make an aircraft carrier, are capable to make submarines by themselves and to export them. So I do think that is in this way we should think about, European strategic autonomy. Of course, it's not good news for the US because obviously to sell weapons, it's a way also to give some political guarantees. But it's since the end of the Second World War, Germany invested in different ways on our military industries, and we should protect and develop them. Because there is a demand also, around the world to avoid the trap of the competition between China and the US in this regard. Now, the Weimar, your question about Weimar. By the way, just an additional point. I will be back on that, but the EII initiative, it is clearly for France, the main purpose of that, it's only to keep the Brits on board. That's the main purpose. And I think that there is no durable European security without the Brits. And that's something on which, Poland and France will, and also Germany will converge, I'm sure. Weimar. Well, to put things very bluntly, and I'm not an official and I have no political affiliation. In France, the appointments in think tanks are not political. So I have to say that Poland is seen today as an isolated country. And as a country which is now unable just to believe in Europe. It's always no. We have this feeling. Maybe it should be corrected. Maybe it's unfair. But as soon as we propose things, it's no. It's a statu quo country to some extent, which benefits so much for Europe, but which seems unable to think about the future of Europe. Sometimes, sorry to be maybe too provocative, but sometimes I have a similar discussion in Warsaw than in Moscow. So for us, it's really a concern, It's really a concern because there was a lot of mistakes made by the French authorities regarding Poland, a lot, like we can list, But one thing is very clear that, Poland is at the core of the EU and we should work with Poland. But we should work with Poland if Poland does want to progress. So if it's down, with the Weimar Triangle, great. If it's through bilateral things, and I do hope that, the visit of President Macron will help to develop things. That's a way for me to try to avoid the question, Ambassador, about the political landscape, because I'm not at all competent on that. Ask your colleague, Ambassador Billet. That's his job to prepare the things. On that, I have absolutely no insight. Second, post-Brexit. It's like a real divorce. We should be able to divorce properly, which is not the case. 3 years of negotiation, massive allocation of political resources to a situation which is still unclear. What is not unclear, it is that for Boris Johnson, Brexit means divergence with the EU, which is certainly the big difference with Theresa May. Having said that, we should make the divorce and find a way, to find the proper supervision of our common kids. And it's doable. It can be made in a reasonable way. And it should be done. And also, again, especially for France. for the security reasons, but not only, you know, the industrial cooperation, the financial things, and so on. But it's bad news for Europe. That's really my feeling, you know. It's weakening the EU for sure, because that's the end of a cycle. Many countries did want to join the EU, and for the first one of the big countries decided to get away. So it's the end of a cycle. Turkey, very important issue, in fact. Seated in Paris, I will tell you that I think that what was said by President Macron about the NATO-like brain-dead organization, it's not related to Trump. I mean, the assessment of the Trump administration is down in Paris. It was related to Turkey. The fact that one ally can intervene, you know, in north of Syria like that, and its consequences, the fact that we let collectively the Kurds, who was the ones who fight against Daesh on the ground, it's a problem for all of us. I mean, for all the NATO, for the US, and for its European allies. And we have not finished with this issue. We have not finished with this issue, and that's why also Turkey is so important, because we will have to deal with the comeback of our jihadists. 2,000 French jihadists, you know, in Levant, plus the families. So it's a huge security challenge, and the lessons coming from this challenging is the fact that Europeans by themselves are completely unable to deal with such situation, which is a shame between us. The day when, you know, the Trump administration decided to withdraw, French and other European special forces were obliged to quit, unable, you know, to stay by themselves, despite the level of military spending we have. So, are we serious? Now, for the evolution of Turkey, the turning point of 2016, the coup against Erdogan, what is very remarkable, it is the rapprochement with Russia. You know, France is very often portrayed as a pro-Russian country within NATO, okay? But which country buys some Russian weapons? So there was a shift from Turkey, and also its intervention in Libya, reflecting the fact that, the point I made, you know, in my initial remarks, the fact that medium powers are now able, because of the vacuum created by the US attitudes, are able to take some side. I think that the thinking we should have in the think tank, it is to say, do we face the end of Western intervention, the cycle of Western intervention, and the beginning of a cycle of non-Western intervention? And I think we are moving in this direction. A question about France and Germany. We need the day to speak about that. To try to catch up the main points. During the last 2 decades, the imbalance between Germany and France increased dramatically in economic terms. Germans are fed up with you know, the inability of the French authority to respect their commitments, and we are fed up with the German austerity, given the fact that this model is also more and more in question given the evolution in China. So that's basically an imbalance. To put things very bluntly, we have the feeling in Paris that for Germany, to some extent, maybe it's too bluntly said, but it's to give you my thoughts, Beijing was more important than Paris in geoeconomic terms, which explain a lot of things regarding 5G and so on. But now the question is also the fact that we have, in my view, this contradiction in the French position to ask Germany to increase their military spending. We are not the only one to ask them so, that's namely the US. And at the same time, you have this feeling in the French military that there is a problem of level. The more we interact within NATO, more we interact with the Brits, with the US. That's a way to improve our capability, our military capabilities. But there is a fear that, you know, to interact with only Europeans, we will decrease our military capabilities. It's not politically correct to say that, but I think it is in the mindset of military. So we had the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle last year with very positive things, maybe not visible, but for instance, you know, we have a joint parliament, for instance. You have also some real improvement in terms of cooperation between technocrats and so on. So it's moving, but like always, you know, slowly. And the big issue is, in fact, that there is a big difference between France and Germany regarding the EU. For Germany, the current situation is okay with the EU. And for France, we ask for more Europe or less Europe, depending on our political cycle. So we are in a cycle in which we ask for more Europe. But, you know, Germany said, okay, that's a cycle. Now, the question is, the very important question is the fact that the first political force in France, it is the Rassemblement National, which is strongly against the EU. And part of the future of the EU, in my view, is clearly related to that. So President Macron is pro-European, but at the same time, he will run for a second run. But, you know, certainly the political situation in France, it's not so clear. And we have the AfD now in Germany. So what will be the political trend, you know, taken by Germany? It's, I think, the big issue for all of us. Last point, PESCO, European Defense Fund. Well, you know, I was in the group which drafted the strategic review in 2017. For the first time, it was made publicly, and believe me, it took us hours of working. We made a table, it's translated into English, it's public. We made a table with 3 categories. The things which should be done in only by European cooperation in terms of military equipment, the things which can be shared, and the things which cannot be shared. To put things very quickly, it's nuclear deterrence for France. The other things, you know, it's open. We made this job, and we expect the response.
Thank you. I've been just told that we have only 15 minutes late. So I know that Michał has a question. Michał Baranowski, he has the GMF, German Marshall Fund office in Warsaw. The gentleman at the back, he's got a question. So you'll be the second. So let's start with Michał.
Great, thank you very much, Marcin and Thomas. Great to spend some more time this morning with you. So 2 questions. One to both of you, to both you and Senator. I mean, now you spent a few hours, almost 24 soon, in Poland. If someone from the Macron's team back in Paris asks you, what are the good ideas for this visit? What are the areas of possible cooperation? What would you say? And Senator, the same to you, the other way around, from the Polish side when it comes to cooperation with France. So that's general question. The other one is a little bit more wonky, more specific. Thank you for unpacking European strategic autonomy. As we talked before, I think there is a lot of misunderstanding throughout Europe, certainly in Warsaw, about what France means by this. But during your presentation, you actually mentioned collective defense. Now, I'm sure you are familiar with the study from IISS that estimated that it would take about 350 billion euro and about 20 years to get Europeans to actually replace US when it comes to collective defense. So I wonder whether this is the right direction for it. And then, of course, then there is a question also of the nuclear deterrence, which you mentioned that I think very clearly European defense, European nuclear deterrence is a non-starter, right? So how do what is the real ambition of European strategic autonomy? And the second question connected to this specifically, do you see ways in which developing further, initially at least, European strategic autonomy, European sovereignty? I prefer actually, I think a lot of the problems is with the term itself. I prefer a term of European ability to act. But whether this can actually go hand in hand with strengthening NATO at the same time, especially if we look at capabilities. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Adam Tracek from DGAP in Berlin. I have a question which is very similar to Michał's first remark. What is, from your perspective, the expectations or the goals of the visit of the French president here? Is it another charm offensive that we have already witnessed back in the region back in 2017 and 18? And how important is economy for this visit? We also know that Bruno Le Maire is coming to Warsaw and Krakow. Is it going to be maybe a similar approach that Poland and Germany have taken, with economic cooperation being one of the driving forces of some kind of reapproachment in this relationship? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now, gentlemen, each of you has 5 minutes to respond and sum up. Let's start with the senator again.
3 points concerning the possible cooperation. Possible new chapter in the cooperation between Paris and Warsaw. New chapter in the cooperation between both countries. First of all, I am pretty sure that President Macron comes here as a representative of a country that believes in the set of values that created both NATO and the European Union, that are not only expressed in the preamble of the Washington Treaty, not only in the Article 2 of the Lisbon Treaty, but they are deeply rooted in the hearts of French people. And they are also shared by majority of Poles. That's why the question of those values and the issue of the rule of law could be and should be one of the main topics very high on the agenda. That's first. Second, security and defense cooperation. We remember the visit of President Hollande during his campaign, before he was elected as a president of French Republic, that began this golden age in our security and defense cooperation. And there were results of this involvement of both sides. For example, during the steadfast yes, the first Article 5 exercise on the territory of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, huge representation of French troops, and then expressed in variety of forms of politico-military cooperation, also the cooperation between defense industries, and it was broken. So now it is a perspective of not of a mechanic return to this golden age, but of shaping, the perspective for the future of the cooperation in this field between both countries. We would here in Poland, I do think that you share this opinion, welcome more French troops involved in exercises and in exercises on our soil. We would welcome more investments of French industry here in this field. The third item on this agenda should be investments in other fields. Economic investments, not only limited to this area of security and defense, but also in other fields, mainly the cooperation concerning nuclear energy between Poland and France. Serious talks should be taken, you know, and should be conducted by both sides concerning this issue.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Three things. The first one about Macron's visit. Is it a charm offensive? It seems to me that the main purpose is just to say we should escape from this blocked situation between France and Poland. And President Macron, in his style, which is sometimes counterproductive, try to create some space to some extent, some play. We didn't speak about Russia, by the way, which is quite surprising, but that's the main idea. I think he's coming because he does think that it's not possible to have a Poland blocked like that. So the first main issue is future of Europe with Poland, or to engage, or to try to restart, or to try to create things. Is it possible? Is it not? I don't know. But that's meaning, you know, this feeling that we are a sort of Poland, which is a statu quo country within the EU, and it should be changed. Second, there are very important issue: climate change, energy efficiency, on which I think we could work on. For France, you know, we have this debate which is very, very sensitive about civil nuclear production, but to some extent we decarbonized things, and there is this idea of carbon neutrality for Europe, which is a challenge for Poland. And I think it's an area in which cooperation is likely, is possible. Third thing, I would say what we have said about defense. So I have no need to elaborate. Fourth thing, to improve the bilateral relations, which is a deficit for France. It's approximately, I was told by the ambassador, approximately 20 billion of exchanges, with a deficit for France of 1 billion. And lastly, I would say lastly, but it can be also another rank. Yes, the domestic evolution of Poland, which is a concern for all Europeans. We have these questions about the separation, you know, of powers, things like that, and it should be discussed. I think, you know, we are adult, able to speak about that, even if it's not to blame, but it's very important regarding the evolution of European political system. Second point, what could be the good idea and so on. You are very often said, you know, that France is speaking about is thinking about Estonia as the type of cooperation, because Estonian came to Sahel, and you had some French troops, you know, with a reassurance measure in Estonia. So it's limited, but in symbolic terms, it was highly, you know, appreciated in Paris. So just to have the impression that Poland takes into consideration what is happening in Sahel, and in a way or others can contribute to what is a concern for all Europeans in security terms, would be, I think, highly appreciated. Is it related to EII? Is it related to PESCO? I don't know, but just to have a signal that to some extent Poland is back in this debate would be, I think, a positive step. Sorry. And your question about the level of strategic ambition, that's very, very good question, and unclear to me. I think we should be very gradual and modest in terms of ambitions. Just succeed the European Defence Fund, because that's for the next 5 or 6 years, I don't remember. But strategic issues should be thought, you know, in terms of 2 decades. So that's the very first step. Let's succeed in implementing that, and let's use it to strengthen the European military industry.
Thank you. So we came nearly to the end of our time. Let's just I have the impression that, you know, we face here with the possible new chapter in the relationship. The relationship has been frozen for the last you know, 5 or so years, really. There is a chance that we at some point will go back to what Senator described here as a golden age. It is important that as this is happening, that the issue of you know, sound value base is very much, you know, present and pronounced. So with that, let me just end the debate and thank you all for coming. Thank you for contributing to the discussion, and please thank our 2 speakers.